It was on these grounds in Kigali on March the 21st that Africa made history when 44 countries signed the African Continental Free Trade Area that would eventually turn into the largest free trade area in the world. Hello and welcome to Doing Business in Rwanda. My name is Michael Mjisha, and on this particular episode, we speak to different stakeholders to understand what the Afcta would mean for African economies, but also for intra-African trade. This is Doing Business in Rwanda. Business leaders argue that for the African Continental Free Trade Area to be a success, nations need to give up some of their sovereignty as the only way there is to ensure significant progress.
We need to look at it more broadly in a very nuanced kind of way. That sovereignty already, if you look, for example, in the EAC concept, each East African country had to give up a little bit of its sovereignty in order to make the EAC happen. Each country in SADC had to give up a little bit of its sovereignty in order to make SADC happen. And that is how progress is made. So progress is not made by holding onto your sovereignty. Progress is made by giving up at the right price, on the right terms, a little bit of your sovereignty.
Under the free trade area arrangement, Africa was to continue trading with the rest of the world. Right. What will happen is that within the internal market of Africa, we're going to remove tariff and non-tariff barriers. Right. But the trading arrangements with the rest of the world will continue. And over time, over the years, if we are very successful in our project, there is nothing which can stop us in having a free trade area between Africa and other countries of the world.
Once in effect, the free trade area would foster smoother cross-border operations for small and medium enterprises and facilitate their expansion.
We know that a lot of African multinational companies have been able to successfully expand across the continent, and they're trading across the continent despite these trading barriers. So we're optimistic that if we can bring down the trading barriers, we may not be able to eliminate them completely, but if we can bring them down progressively over time, our businesses will continue to succeed even better. The aspiration for us is not just the current African multinationals. It is also a deep reservoir of highly capable and highly innovative small local companies, local SMEs and local champions that are in all African countries that have, quite frankly, sufficient capabilities to move beyond their local borders and expand into the rest of the continent.
The agreement was endorsed and signed in Kigali, and the different African nations will have to ratify and implement it. However, some rather bigger economies were seen to be reluctant in making the decision for the free trade area, which Dr. Kitui mentioned it's just a case of being slow-footed.
We saw that even in the East African community. We saw that in COMESA. We've seen that in the negotiations for the tripartite interlocking of COMESA, ECA, and SADC. There will always be the slow-footed, the uncertain. They do not represent the negative. They just represent human nature, that some are not always risk takers. They want to see how it works with others before they come along. Some can even be thinking about all the lost customs revenue until they realize that you generate value such that alternative sources of revenue directly related to the new movement of goods and services compensates for that loss of customs revenue.
The Afcta hopes to cover more than 1.2 billion people and over $4 trillion in combined consumer and business spending. For this to happen, regional blocs are urged to harmonize their systems to ensure free movement of people and goods.
For an Africa Continental Trade Agreement, we need to have industrialization. We need to empower our African private sector. We need to have a strong African product, and that's why the whole sessions of the business forum was concentrating on how to have a competitive, quality, strong African product, to go away from exporting our raw materials, but an industrialized material, value addition for our African products. How can we do that? That's the main objective.
It's easier, for example, to ship goods and services between Cape Verde and Portugal than between Cape Verde and Senegal, which is next door. It's difficult to move your things between Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire than to ship your stuff between Cote d'Ivoire and France. So yes, it's good to sign these agreements, to have this first I call it first step. But then we need to begin to see how we harmonize our systems on the continent so that we can actually be able to move between the countries, move goods easily, and provide the facilities to be able to trade. This is crucial.
Africa's colonial heritage is an infrastructure that runs from the sources of minerals to the ports for export. And Africa's urban centers have developed along this trajectory of railways and roads from the copper mines of Kasese, from the diamond mines of Shinyanga to the port cities. Now, Africa's integration now requires an infrastructure that moves from an African country to an African country, not an African mineral deposit to an African port. So the construction of the physical and soft infrastructure necessary to bring to realization the potential of CFTA is going to be one of the most important challenges of the next phase. We'll work with the African Union, with the African governments and the regional entities, not only to help design the most viable and sustainable infrastructure, but look for innovative financing methods and investment possibilities to realize the potential of this CFTA.
Now, we've been able to track the conversation on infrastructure as the immediate need for Africa to boost intra-African trade. But what more needs to be put in place?
In the early 1990s, intra-African trade share of total African trade was between 9 and 10%. Today, depending on the year, 15 to 17%. That is progress. We see it even growing further. However, a lot of things need to be done. Some of them are in the political area, like what happened today. But more importantly, there are things that can be done to create the opportunities without even the politics. I'll give you an example. Trade information is a huge issue. Some believe infrastructure is a problem of intra-African trade. It is a problem of intra-African trade. But I think it is a generalized problem of African trade. Because today, Africa is able to trade $1 trillion about. So the infrastructure available in Africa can carry $1 trillion of trade. The question is, why is Africa's share of that $1 trillion just 15 or 17%? Why is it not 40%? It is because the seller or the buyer in Nigeria does not know that he could buy polish from Kenya. The leather worker in Kenya does not know that the raw leather he needs is being exported by Burundi. So we need to have this information. When we create it, that will add significant volumes to intra-African trade.
Other stakeholders believe that interconnectivity is a more pressing issue for the continent, and this would need to be revised or bettered before we start talking infrastructure.
So when you have non-tariff barriers, what essentially happens is that you are decreasing more competitive products coming in from outside for slightly more expensive products that are being produced inside. Most of the times, and I think that this has been the debate on how long do you need a protected industry. And there is a lot of discussion around, what length of time does it take for you to grow an industry to a sufficiently comfortable level so that you can open it up for competition. I don't think that there is any dogmatic view about protection. I think the important thing is that protection should not lead to inefficiencies and cost you on trade.
For me, the base of trade is communication. So I think the first thing we need to do is to interconnect our country. I think among all those other infrastructure, that will be the first thing to come, connecting our country. When we connect our country, we will remove physical barrier. Because tomorrow, if people can talk, they can exchange data easily, we will remove those barriers. And personally, for the past 8 years, I've been involved into fiber optic infrastructure for many various governments. So far, we have installed I helped structure financing for more than 28,000 kilometers of fiber optic. So I have seen how that's critical in terms of enabling communication, data exchange.
Infrastructure is not just about the physical aspect. Our trade also suffers at the borders of the countries. I mean, we have trucks that are held sometimes for 3 or 4 weeks. So there are also non-tariff barriers, but there's also the processing time and transaction time, which adds a lot to already an expensive cost of transport. For that, we also are launching and facilitating the ICT aspects across the continent, so that the digital transformation of the continent, either in terms of physical connectivity, but also the norms, the regulations, the integration of the single digital market of the continent.
Organizations like NBA Africa hope to bet on free movement of people and goods to have leagues in different countries in belief that this will foster growth for the game as a business over the continent.
I mentioned Basketball Without Borders. This is our flagship event every summer. We bring people, young people from over 35 countries across Africa. You gotta go and apply for visas for all of them. I think, if we are in a situation where now that is eliminated, it helps, and it encouraging even more opportunities beyond Basketball Without Borders, beyond what's happening at the grassroots level. You can talk about leagues, across the continent where clubs can be located in different countries, but they are competing. The talent that we have all across the world can come back and really contribute in creating this industry that we talk about. Again, it's about building the whole ecosystem and training people in other sectors other than just, those players playing or the coaches. As I was saying, you need all kinds of functions and professions to make a sports league work.
And that's where we leave it on this episode of Doing Business in Rwanda, with stakeholders calling out to all African politicians to quickly ratify and implement the African Continental Free Trade Area that is the largest free trade area in the world and expected to boost intra-African trade by 52% by the year 2022. Now, if you have any feedback to this episode of Doing Business in Rwanda, simply send us an email to dbir@abn360.com or tweet us at DBI Rwanda. My name is Michael Mjisha, and from the entire Doing Business in Rwanda team, thank you very much for watching.